So what do you think of when you hear the word conflict? If you're thinking about your personal life, you might think, I have a conflict with somebody else, or you might think of the phrase a conflict of interest. If you're in the state of Tennessee, you might have a reminder of those awful test questions where they show a picture of something and they ask, what kind of conflict does this represent? Which has nothing to do with literature. Conflict expresses a struggle between two opposing forces. Without conflict, there is no story. Conflict has to happen in order for any story to happen, fiction or nonfiction. Because conflict comes in two different kinds. It comes in internal conflict and it comes in external conflict. Your classic internal conflict is a struggle inside of somebody, trying to decide between two parts of themselves. Are they going to do this or are they going to do that? Are they going to choose this or that? In every teenage romance story, do I choose this person or do I choose that person? Do I choose this vampire or this werewolf? On the other hand, you have external conflict, which is a struggle with any force outside of yourself. This can be a struggle with another person, or with society, or with nature, or with technology, as long as that is external to the protagonist. The reason that conflict is essential is because conflict forces characters to make decisions, and when they make decisions, that's what moves the plot of the story forward. All choices are a result of internal conflict. Even a choice as simple as what am I going to eat for lunch requires an internal conflict where you weigh those two options. And so you have these two forces that fight with each other, that have these conflict that move the stories forward. One classic example that you might have heard is in the amazing story Lord of the Flies, about a bunch of middle school age boys that get shipwrecked on an island and are forced to build a society by themselves. Obviously, the first conflict you could point to is the fact that the boys are in conflict to survive. They're in conflict with the elements, with the wild, finding food, finding shelter. But they also begin to become in conflict with each other. Another example of external conflict. When Jack and Ralph argue over who's going to be in charge, it devolves into a very straightforward external conflict. But this external conflict also creates internal conflict in each of the boys as they have to decide who are they going to give their loyalty to. As Piggy and Simon debate whether or not they're going to side with Ralph or with Jack, they have an internal conflict. This also creates an internal conflict as each of the boys has to decide which side they're going to take. They struggle with both sides of themselves. Do they want to follow the law and the rules, or do they want to live on the wild side and to hunt and to kill? A second example that you're probably familiar with is the short story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Telltale Heart. The Telltale Heart opens with internal conflict. It starts off with the narrator telling you that he's not crazy, that no matter what you've heard, he's not insane, when clearly he is. Everything he says shows that he's struggling with, should I kill this person or should I not kill this person? You hear his internal conflict because he continues to talk about how he stood at the door for a week and watched this man every night in order to decide whether or not he was going to kill him. This decision of, do I murder this person or do I not murder this person, is an example of internal conflict. Eventually, of course, he murders the old man and hides his body under the floorboards. That internal conflict leads to external conflict. And then as the police show up, he begins to feel guiltier and guiltier, with his guilt manifesting in hearing the sound of the Telltale Heart. That guilt is another example of internal conflict, of him struggling with the idea that the old man is still alive and he can hear him. And of course, he ends up giving himself up, even though the police officers didn't suspect anything. So you see that this is just a big circle, that internal conflict can lead to external conflict, and external conflict can lead to internal conflict, and it keeps going around and around. The important thing is that conflict forces characters to make decisions, and these decisions are what the story is made out of. No conflict, no decisions, no decisions, no plot. So by now you might understand why I think the questions with one little picture asking about conflict are pretty stupid. Because conflict is woven into every story. Conflict is a complex chain of cause and effect that can't be boiled down to one picture of a person shaking their fist at another person and suddenly you're supposed to know person versus person, or person versus robot, or person versus technology, or person versus environment. It's much more complex than that because one causes the other and it's all connected into the overall plot of the story. Now, unfortunately, you're probably going to end up with those stupid questions, but you're also going to see conflict in other questions, questions that require more detail. And remember that conflict isn't just a fiction concept. If you look throughout history, full of conflicts. Every war, every argument, every political race is an example of conflict. The story of life is full of conflict, fiction and nonfiction. So when you see the word conflict, ask yourself, is this internal? Is the person struggling with a decision? Are they struggling with their identity? Are they struggling with a choice that they have to make? Or is it external? Are they in conflict with someone or something that exists outside of themselves? Once you've identified that, you need to decide what choice do they make. Remembering that sometimes even the choice to do nothing is still a choice. Once you have these things down, you understand the character better. This ties into so many other literature concepts. It ties into characterization, plot, cause and effect. Conflict is the key to everything. And because conflict is the key to everything, you see this in every pop culture movie recently. You have Batman versus Superman. You have Captain America versus Iron Man. Because conflict is necessary to a good, exciting story. So remember, conflict forces characters to make choices, and those choices move the plot forward. If you see any of those key words, conflict, choice, plot, it's got to be tied in there somewhere. Even if some, even if, even if a question doesn't say conflict directly, look for those key words and make sure that you understand it. No, that's terrible. Conflict is in everything. It is in every story, fiction and nonfiction. Look for it, and you'll understand all the concepts connected to it much better.